Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, checking your phone, and realizing that every single government on Earth has just vanished. Every parliament is completely empty, every military command center totally silent. So, what happens next? Would the world literally just stop spinning? Would everything descend into absolute chaos? Or would you start to notice that a much bigger, completely invisible machine simply kept humming along in the background without them? Well, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're actually looking behind the curtain to figure out who really pulls the strings. Section 1. The Grand Illusion. The faces we are taught to fear. From the time we're kids, we're essentially programmed to fear or revere a very specific cast of characters. You know the ones: the presidents, the prime ministers, the tech billionaires, the Wall Street legends, the military generals. These are the faces plastered all over our television screens. They seem so incredibly powerful, right? They're always up on a podium taking credit for global events, market shifts, the whole direction of human history. We just assume that when they speak, the world listens. But what if they aren't the masters? What if they're literally just the middle managers? Think about the massive, almost sarcastic contradiction we live with every single day. On one hand, you have the face. That's the politician promising to fix the economy, or the CEO promising to revolutionize the world. But on the flip side, you have the constraint. That's the cold, ruthless, unfeeling reality of global markets, interest rates, and supply chains. Here's the secret. The politician doesn't dictate terms to the market dictates terms to the politician. Section 2. The Limits of Power. When the math beats the military. Look, having tanks and treaties is great, but they require serious funding. And the macroeconomic data currently backing these so-called masters into a corner is absolutely terrifying. $100 trillion. According to the IMF's Fiscal Monitor report, global public debt has just blown right past a staggering $100 trillion. Just try to wrap your head around that for a second. No matter who sits in the Oval Office, no matter which party is in control of a parliament, they are all drowning in an ocean of debt that they absolutely cannot just legislate away. As the World Bank points out, increases in debt to GDP ratios generate progressively larger rises in interest rates. Let's translate that. By 2029, global debt is projected to hit 100% of global GDP. That means sovereign bond markets entirely dictate what a world leader can or cannot do. Seriously, a president's big ambitious agenda doesn't survive 5 minutes if the bond market decides to punish their borrowing. This brings us to a concept the IMF calls the sovereign bank nexus. And guys, it's basically a hidden doom loop. Here's how it works. Banks hold massive amounts of domestic government debt. If the government starts looking risky, the banks take a massive hit. But if the banks start failing, the government basically goes bankrupt trying to bail them out. It's like two people chained together drowning. It holds entire nations hostage. So honestly, do you still think the prime minister is the one calling the shots here? Section 3. The Invisible Machine. The Systems Without Passports. Okay, so if we look beneath the loud political headlines, what do we find? We find the underlying plumbing of global finance and trade. We are officially living in the era of geoeconomics. As the IMF's Finance and Development magazine points out, modern power isn't just about military might anymore. Forget the tanks. It's about tariffs, it's about critical mineral supply chains, and geoeconomic coercion. The line between an economic policy and national security, yeah, that's completely gone. You don't actually need to invade a country to crush it today. You just lock it out of the trade network. Let's rapidly run through some of these massive systemic forces identified by the Bank for International Settlements. First, trade route disruptions. These can literally bring entire nations to a grinding halt. Then you have non-bank financial institutions, basically the shadow banks, moving oceans of capital completely outside of any traditional regulatory grasp. And now we have emerging tokenized unified ledgers creating truly borderless finance. These forces dictate global outcomes for sure, regardless of who just won the latest popularity contest. I mean, election cycle. And the scariest part? This machine is accelerating way past any politician's control. Under the severely adverse scenarios projected by the IMF, global debt could spike to 115% of GDP in just a few short years. When you have debt levels that astronomically high, policy isn't policy anymore. It's just pure crisis management. The financial system is the one actually driving the car. The world leaders are just buckled into the passenger seat, hoping we don't crash. Section 4. Systems outlive the powerful. The faces change, the machine survives. Which leads us to the ultimate great irony of global power. The faces change. Billionaires rise and fall. Governments are, by design, temporary. We swap them out every 4 or 5 years. A new administration comes in, rips up the old rules, writes a bunch of new ones, and then boom, they get voted out. It's fleeting. It's incredibly loud. And honestly, it's just distracting. But contrast that temporary lifespan with the deep, deep endurance of our institutional frameworks. The U.S. Federal Reserve System has been operating since 1913. Think about that. It has weathered world wars, Great Depressions, and global pandemics. The underlying architecture of money and trust outlives the loudest, angriest voices on your social media feed by decades. Just trace the timeline of recent global shocks. We had the Great Financial Crisis in 2008, the pandemic shock in 2020, the 100 trillion global debt reality in 2024, the massive geoeconomic strains projected for 2026. During every single one of these crises, world leaders rushed to the podiums to either take the blame or steal the credit. But what truly navigated us through those crises wasn't a really good speech. It was the underlying plumbing. Central bank liquidity lines, cross-border payment systems, shadow banking networks. They were quietly stabilizing the ship while the politicians were busy panicking on TV. Section 5. The big question. Looking behind the curtain. So, if the leaders don't actually control the markets and the markets constantly constrain the leaders, what are we actually looking at? I want you to completely reconsider everything you think you know. If corporate titans and tech billionaires are the ultimate rulers of our world, why do entire massive industries exist long before they're born and continue humming along long after they're gone? They are just players in a game, and the rules of that game were written way before they ever even walked onto the field. Maybe, just maybe, the people we see on television aren't actually running the world at all. Maybe our total obsession with politics and celebrity CEOs is exactly what keeps us looking in the wrong direction. True power isn't a famous face on a screen. True power is the invisible architecture of debt, global trade flows, and borderless financial institutions that we've just scratched the surface of. The politicians? They are simply the customer service representatives for a system they do not control. They are just the faces of a machine that most people never even notice. And if that's true, if this immortal, invisible system is what really controls the world, then who built the machine?